Hello there, welcome to this video. What we're going to cover is if you're someone right now who's trying to heal and you've started to get an idea that it's something to do with your fight or flight response. You're getting a sense that your fight or flight response right now is too active. You're in this survival mode and it's impacting your healing. So this is going to be for you if you are battling right now with a chronic condition. It could be a chronic illness or a disease. And the typical routes that you've tried, whether it's through the doctors, medication, private treatments outside of the typical mainstream routes. Maybe it's you've had a prognosis or a diagnosis and just all this stuff has been happening in your life and you're not really getting anywhere. And you've got to the point where you think, I think this is related to me being in survival mode and there is something subconscious because of my experiences in my life that is driving this. This is going to be super helpful. So what we're going to look at is what is actually driving this, because we need to identify the cause, right? What is keeping you in this state of fight or flight? If we don't know what that is, we can't really make any intervention. That's super key. And we're not going to use a band-aid approach and try and cover this up. We're going to put a spotlight on it, we're going to expose it, and we're going to dissolve it, and then we're going to replace it with a particular solution so that you can get out of survival mode, reduce the flare-ups, the symptoms, also the mental frustration and the brain fog that you get with all this stress as well, and then get you into a mode where you can heal, where you can recharge and start moving into this version of you that you are desperately wanting to move into. Okay, so let's go into it. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ollie. I was previously struggling for years with a chronic condition called post-concussion syndrome that was driven by stress, being stuck in fight or flight, and inflammation. What we know now is that chronic stress is a massively contributing factor to disease, right? Chronic stress produces inflammation, which drives disease in all sorts of form, in all sorts of ways that genes express themselves. But it's this common factor. So what we've got to look at is, okay, what is going on? First, to quickly understand, if you've not heard of this, I'm going to explain what your autonomic nervous system is, which is where this fight or flight response resides. Your autonomic nervous system is essentially the part of you through your brain, your spinal cord, and the nerves within your body that runs everything that you don't have to think about. All the unconscious processes like digesting your food, your heartbeat, your breathing rate, hair growth, all of these things and so many more that I can't list because there's thousands and thousands of them. This system runs, okay, and it does it in the background. But this system has two branches that it constantly flips in and out of, so it's very perceptive. One of those is the fight or flight response, which we're going to talk about, which is called the sympathetic response. The other one of those is the rest and digest response, which is called the parasympathetic response. Now, the fight or flight response is incredibly helpful in dangerous situations, right? If we're in extreme danger, we need this system. We need all of the blood within our body to move towards our limbs. We need to increase our breathing rate. We need to dilate our pupils so we can be more vigilant and take in as much information as we can so that we can escape, or we can fight back, or we can play dead. Now this system, as I said, it's really helpful in short spaces of time, but when we're in it chronically, it drives sickness, right? And because we are not in a state of balance. Our nervous system has to move between these two and to do it efficiently and elegantly, and this is what's called resilience. So you are a resilient person when you have the ability to dip in and out of these systems elegantly and efficiently. What happens is, for the majority of people, is that they are chronically stuck in this state of fight or flight, where hormonally they are full of adrenaline, they're full of cortisol, right? And they are in this catabolic state, which is a breaking down state. It's not a recharging state, it is a breaking down state. So this is the issue. Now you're probably wondering, okay, well, what's causing this? How am I stuck in fight or flight? Chronic stress, primarily through the emotional experiences that we've had in our life. Okay, so if we're stuck chronically in fight or flight, it's because we have been through experiences in our life, primarily from our childhood, but also from chronic work stress where we are under pressure all the time. It could be financial stress, it could be relationship strain, it could be grief. And more often than not, it's a multitude of all of these particular things together, okay, including our environment that we're in, including the food that we eat, which is, in my view, a bit of a more of a peripheral issue, but the core issue is this emotional state, right? These experiences and these emotions that we're holding on to, essentially where we just only operate from the emotions of fear, from the emotions of anger, could be frustration, could be grief, shame, guilt. These emotions are related to being stuck in a state of fight or flight. okay? You cannot feel in a state of balance if you are constantly overwhelmed with guilt, or if you're constantly feeling anxious and worried about your future, right? Or if you're feeling angry, if you're holding on to this anger. So when we condition ourselves to keep feeling these emotions, as I said, primarily within our childhood, and then we go through adolescence, but also in the working environment that we're in, or the household that we're in, we are constantly in this state of stress, right? And if we do it consistently enough, if we keep repeating feeling this state, our body gets used to it, right? And it adapts, and it keeps getting the same stimulus. So we keep feeling the same emotions, whether it is grief, whether it is anger, whether it is anxiety. We just constantly having this emotional state. So the body adjusts and says, okay, this is who you are. Okay, this is subconscious. If we do something habitually enough, the body just constantly takes it in as subjective and goes, okay, cool. This is how we are. This is our identity. Now the problem arises is that when we've been in that state so long, these emotional states create this stress in us, right? And our body is under constant stress. It is never given a chance to take the foot off the gas, which is that fight or flight response, and drop into the rest and digest response, where our breathing slows down. We're able to digest food properly, right? We're able to repair. Our immune system is able to strengthen itself. So, long story short, what happens is through our childhood and through our life up until a particular point, we have been in chronic emotional states which have kept us in this fight or flight. And we've been in it so much that it's become default and it starts to run us. And we don't normally notice this because we're so typically busy with life. It's only when we start seeing it through these external symptoms within our body, whether it's the mental symptoms or the physical symptoms, where we just suddenly realize, like, I'm in so much pain, right? Or I'm dizzy all the time, or I get these constant headaches, right? Or we start to see it manifest in disease. And that's the point where we think, what is going on? And we take a look at our life and we're like, what? We try the typical routes, but nothing really gets to the root of the problem, because we're essentially stuck in this fight or flight mode because of the experiences we've had within our lives, which is understandable. Okay, and it's not anyone's fault. This is just where we're at. So this is where we get to the point where we have to work out, okay, how can I turn things around? And if you kind of follow the trail here, you'll start to see that this does make sense. First of all, we have to let go of these emotions and these emotional states that we've built into our subconscious, right? These patterns of constantly feeling, just unconsciously feeling guilty, feeling shame, feeling angry, feeling anxious, right? These emotions keep us in this state of fight or flight. I give you an example. Even growing up as a kid, in the household when I was young, I was one of those kids that was hypersensitive to everyone around me. Right, so I would be on eggshells if anyone else in the room that I was in was slightly anxious or was angry. I would constantly feel it, and it would drive that into me too. And I'm sure you've had experiences like this, right? And there's other experiences that we've all been through. But what we don't realize is that when we're doing this when we're young and it's constant, it becomes part of our identity. And those emotional states then start to drive our thoughts. So all the thoughts we have are related to being angry, to being frustrated, to being worried. And then all the actions that we take are also stemming from the thoughts that we're having, right? If I'm constantly, as unconsciously feeling really angry, and we all know people who are angry all the time, right, as their identity, that's because it's just been built into them. They're feeling anger. The thoughts that they have will be angry thoughts about people and places. And as a result, the actions that they take are based in and from a state of anger, from a state of survival. Right? And then they, as a result, because they do something from that place of anger, it starts to reinforce, because they do it from a place of anger, then they experience more anger, right? Because anger just creates more anger, unless you've got someone who can diffuse it. But typically you just get the same response. So the way to solve this is we have to spotlight, and that means notice within ourselves when we're experiencing these emotional patterns or these thoughts that are in contrast to the life we want to live. Any thoughts that are destructive, that are based in fear, that are based in worry or frustration or anger or guilt or shame, we just have to spotlight them. We don't have to change them, we just have to notice them. And if they come up and we start to feel them, we've got to let them go and process them. Okay, that's the first thing. We're not trying to suppress this or bypass this. We've got to let this stuff as and when it comes up. We haven't got to re-feel it and go into that moment. It's just letting it come up energetically and letting it go. Okay, now from that point, once we start to let this stuff go, we now need to wire in new emotional states that are associated with being in a state of balance. And this is a real common issue that people I have who I work with, is that they find it very difficult. And I'll ask you now, could you now feel freedom? Could you feel gratitude? Could you feel appreciation? Can you feel compassion? And I don't mean in your head thinking about it, but can you actually feel in your body and breathe and have that experience of total gratitude, or complete peace, or abundance, or freedom, or compassion? If you can't, first of all, that's really normal in this day and age. So I know it's sometimes scary because people think, well, I don't know how I'm going to be able to feel these emotions. It's hard for me to feel emotions. It's hard for you to feel elevated emotions that get you into this state of out of survival and back into balance, back into that rest and digest. But if there's any consolation, the fact that it's really easy for you to have been able to feel grief, right? To feel anger, frustration, to feel worry and anxiety. So you do have the ability to feel. And it's going to take a bit of training, but it's possible. And it's the only way, in my view, you get out of this, is by rewiring your emotional state, letting go of those old states that are driving all this chronic stress and inflammation, and begin to replace them and teach yourself how to feel emotionally as if you are the healed version of you. That's what it comes down to. So if you were healed right now, how would you feel, right? If you were living your best life, you'd feel huge amounts of gratitude. You'd feel free. You'd feel whole. You'd feel peaceful, right? You'd be able to appreciate things more. You'd have more compassion for people who maybe were in your situation. So it's those emotional states we have to wire in. And just like we did when we were younger, when we were unconsciously wiring in all these emotional states that were keeping us stuck in a state of survival, we can simply swap them out and keep consciously feeling them until they start running us. And what this is going to do, in a short space of time, you're going to notice that your head clears very quickly. But then what's going to happen is you'll notice that you start to feel this sense of relief. Okay, and then your symptoms will gradually begin to diminish. Not hugely, but you'll start to notice that they take the edge off, because your body is not in fight or flight anymore. It's switching out and it's getting a bit of time to repair, and a bit of time to breathe, right? And there's a bit of natural tiredness, not exhaustion. There's like a sense of, oh, I'm repairing. Okay, and if you do this consistently, then you'll notice it becomes your default state. And you can just naturally tap into gratitude. You can tap into freedom, joy, right? Abundance, appreciation, whatever it is. And at the cellular level, when you start feeling those emotions and you do it enough, your cells are obviously getting all the chemistry related to those emotions, like oxytocin, DHEA, right? And your body's able to breathe, and it gets itself out of survival mode. So this is the process. And this is specifically, as I said, for you, if you're someone who is at the point where you're kind of a bit isolated and a bit lost with what you need to do, but you have a very strong sense that this is what's causing this chronic disease, illness, or condition, is being stuck in this fight or flight. Or if anything, it's not allowing you to heal. So you now know that this is what's been causing it, these experiences that we've had within our lives that have become just unconscious. Because if you do anything for long enough, or feel anything for long enough, your body just starts to habitually do it without you even trying, right? So then what we have to do is notice those patterns, dissolve them, let them go, so they don't control us anymore, and we start replacing them with emotions that support our body. And we build them into us, build them into our subconscious, so then they drive our thoughts, then they drive our actions, and then they create different results. I really hope this was helpful. Take care of yourself. Speak to you soon.